Gonzaga already beat among the best Big 12 teams in the entire conference, and now they prep to host one of the worst.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, we meet the Arizona State Sun Devils, who the Zags will host on Sunday afternoon, 2 hours after the Zag women start their game against Stanford on the road. We're going to get you ready for both of those games on today's show. We start talking Sun Devil basketball here. Gonzaga takes on Arizona State Sunday, November 10th, 2 p.m. Pacific time. The game will be on ESPN. It's regular ESPN, no mystery how to get this game. If you have any kind of cable package with ESPN, if you have Fubo, anything like that, YouTube TV, you should be able to get this one on ESPN. Interestingly, this is the first matchup between Gonzaga and Arizona State, two teams located on or near the West Coast that have in the past been strong basketball programs. Arizona State hasn't been particularly great historically. They've had some successful kind of periods of time, but still a bit of a surprise considering how often Gonzaga has played Arizona and, of course, UCLA and many of the other former Pac-12 schools throughout their history. But guess this is as good a time as any to face this team here, Arizona State. This will be, of course, Gonzaga's second straight game against a Big 12 opponent after opening up the season on Monday with that massive win over the Baylor Bears. It'll also be back-to-back WCC opponents for Arizona State as they are taking on Santa Clara tonight, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. That game will be on Flow Sports. Much more difficult to find a way to watch that. I'm hoping to find a stream or some way to watch that game this evening. So we're recording, and all of our data and information that we have on Arizona State for this season so far is just based on their first game against Idaho State. But by the time Gonzaga plays them on Sunday, they will have played another game against a good Santa Clara team. And there's no FanDuel lines for that game at this point, but I was quite surprised to see that ESPN's matchup predictor gave Arizona State like a 67% chance of winning that game. I'm not sure I'm buying into that. I don't know whether they're a lot higher on Arizona State than I am or a lot lower on Santa Clara, who picked up an opening victory over a good St. Louis team. Arizona State did not look good in their season opener against Idaho State. They looked even worse in an exhibition scrimmage against Duke. I know we're not taking those into account, nor should we, but man, they got boat raced by Duke in that exhibition game. And then they went out in their first game of the season. They played Idaho State, beat them 55-48. This was an ugly performance against a team that is currently 300th at KenPom. To only score 55 points against a team that low is pretty concerning if you're an Arizona State fan. They shot 20 of 55 from the field. That's 36.5%. They shot 7 of 24 from deep. That's 29%. So basically under 35%, under 37% from the field, under 30% from three against a team in the outside the top 300 at KenPom right now. Not a great start for Bobby Hurley's team. They're 78th at KenPom currently. Again, that will change by the time this game tips off after they play Santa Clara. Their adjusted offense is currently 140th, but their adjusted defense is 30th. Again, they did hold Idaho State to 48 points, so they do deserve some credit for what they did on the defensive end of the floor. Hurley's team, tempo-wise, is 125, which feels kind of high for a team that only scored 55 points in that game. But again, all of those numbers, potentially by the time you're listening to this, certainly by the time Gonzaga plays Arizona State, those numbers will all be different as the numbers will change, probably somewhat dramatically, just because we only have one game sample sizes for most of these teams. Coach Hurley is squarely on the hot seat. This is his 10th season at Arizona State. He has made 3 NCAA tournament appearances in 10 years, but they were all as 11 seeds, and he only has 1 victory. So 1 tournament victory, 3 tournament appearances, 10 seasons. They're usually around 500, and that's in the Pac-12. Now, of course, they're in their first season in the Big 12. Preseason projections have them near the very bottom of the standings in that conference, alongside Utah, alongside Colorado in some places. So 3 of the 4 new schools in the Big 12 not really moving the needle for that conference, whereas Arizona, of course, is helping the top end of that conference. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is Bobby Hurley's final season with the Sun Devils if things do not turn around, especially because they spent a whole lot of money this offseason. NIL is temporarily at least not an issue for the Sun Devils basketball program. They spent a bunch of money. They brought in some high-profile players, 2 top 25 freshmen in the 2024 class, some big-time transfers. So if you don't deliver when you actually got some real talent on your roster, that tends to be when coaches go bye-bye. 5-star freshman big Jayden Quaintance is the biggest name here for this team. A decommit from Kentucky. He's going to have to play 2 years of college basketball because he is that young. So he's very, very young. One of the youngest players in college basketball. Big, long, super athlete, going to be an NBA player. He's just tremendously talented and gifted, and has the requisite size and shot blocking ability to be an impactful player at the next level. But he is very young and very raw. And that showed up again. A player who's a projected NBA center only scored 2 points in his season debut against Idaho State. He had 2 points, 2 steals, a rebound, an assist, and shot 0 of 6 from the field in 19 minutes. He did have 6 blocks, an indication of what the skill set primarily is for Quaintance at this point. He is a shot blocker, but he is not much of an offensive contributor yet. But again, one of the youngest players in college basketball. Bobby Hurley's team also added Alston Mason, a transfer from Missouri State, 6'2" guard, averaged 17.5 points per game. Last year at Missouri State, scored 14 in their opening game against Idaho State, was their leading scorer, 5 of 9 from the field in that one. They also had Ball State transfer forward Bashir Jihad, 6'9" forward from Detroit, played at Ball State. And averaged just under 19 points a game last year and 8 rebounds, was a tremendous unheralded mid-major player last year, didn't get a lot of buzz or attention, but now he goes to Arizona State. And in that first game against Idaho State, he failed to score. He did get 8 rebounds, so he matched what he had averaged in his final season at Ball State. He was just about 18.5 points short of matching that in the point column. 0 of 7 from the field for him. Arizona State also adds a 4-star freshman guard, Josan Sanan. He is a 6'5" guard, 24th ranked prospect in the class of 2024 at 247 Sports. He had 11 points, 3 boards, and 3 assists in that opener against Idaho State. So again, a new look roster, lots of new faces, haven't played a lot of minutes together. So I think this is a team that potentially will get better as the season goes on, in the sense that, I think if they played Idaho State in February, they would probably beat them by more than 7 points, but they're also going to play a ridiculous gauntlet of a schedule in conference play. So even if they are more cohesive as a unit, even if Quaintance and some of the transfers are more prepared for college basketball as they get into conference play, they're going to be playing really, really good teams night in and night out. So not expecting a great year for Arizona State. But what does that mean for Gonzaga? Because Gonzaga blew the doors off a team expected to finish 12 to 15 spots higher than Arizona State in the Big 12 conference standings. But does that mean Gonzaga is going to go out and win this one by 60? Probably not. It is the first game at the Kennel, so we're going to have some fun stuff. We're going to be looking forward to watching some things we want to see Gonzaga do in this one, and we're going to talk about those things coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is not just another generic job board. They help you find the professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job, but just might be open to the perfect role. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, folks, you're not looking in the right place. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn also knows that all small businesses are wearing so many different hats and they just may not have the time or the resources to hire effectively. And that's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process even easier. And that includes launching a feature that helps you write your own job descriptions. So join the 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn for hiring and post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still closing out the week, getting you ready for Gonzaga's Sunday game in the afternoon against the Arizona State Sun Devils, the first game at the McCarthy Athletic Center for the Zags this season, and another matchup against a Big 12 opponent. For those of you who are longtime listeners, who are in your second or third season, fourth season listening to Locked On Zags, before games, we always try to preview the opposing team, and then we give you either keys to victory or things we'll be watching for. It sort of depends on the quality of the opponent. I don't need to give you, here's exactly what Gonzaga needs to do to beat Pacific, because typically they're going to beat Pacific or, Mississippi Valley State or some of those other teams they've played in the non-conference in the past. Whereas when they're playing Baylor, although they clearly handled that one, you're going to talk more about things they need to do to win. It's a little bit of a mix of both here with Arizona State. It's still too early in the season to just assume every game is going to be a huge blowout because they did it to Baylor. But we're also going to talk about, what do we want to see in this game, especially if Gonzaga is in a position where they're going to comfortably win the ball game. The first thing, this is a key to victory and just something I really think we want to see in this one, is a bounce back from Graham Ike. And I say bounce back a little bit in air quotes because his performance on Monday against Baylor got a little bit more scrutiny than I think his end of game line perhaps necessitated. He had 15 points on 6 of 12 shooting. Is 6 of 12 good for a low post player? No, you want him to be better than that. He was over 60% last year on 2-pointers. I think he was 6 of 11. I think he did take a 3 in that game. So he was a little over 50%. But on the season, you're going to want Graham Ike to shoot better than 6 of 12. But 15 points on 6 of 12 shooting is far from a bad game for Graham Ike. It was really a pretty bad first half for him where he missed some bunnies, he struggled. And then early in the second half, he had a couple possessions in a row where he got blocked. And that's not something we saw a ton last year. One of them was by VJ Edgecombe, who displayed later in the game that he's one of the best athletes in all of college basketball with that thunderous dunk on Joe Few. So I'm not overly concerned about a super freak athlete blocking Graham Ike, but yeah, it would be nice to see him play well in this game, to be that more dominant force where he's up in the 17, 19, 21 points, efficient shooting, doesn't miss shots at the rim that he normally makes, is better at the free throw line, which was something that he was kind of alarmingly bad at in that first game again. You're allowed to have a bad first game. You're allowed to have a bad game at the free throw line every once in a while. And if Graham Ike goes 3 of 6 from the line in January, nobody's really talking about it. But when he does it in the first game of the year, it just gets a little bit more press. That's how first games of the year tend to work for any players. You inflate super strong performances, you magnify super weak performances, and ultimately it's probably all going to even out as the season goes on. But playing a really talented defensive big in Jayden Quaintance is a good test for Graham Ike, and more so on the other side where it's a big test for Quaintance himself, who is, again, one of the youngest players in college basketball. Graham should be able to go to work here. He should be able to use his savvy, his veteran experience, get him in the air, get him to commit some early fouls, potentially put him on the bench in this one, and go to work. I think that's what we want to see from Graham. Gonzaga can win this game even if Graham doesn't play great. But you want to see Graham start to look like the player he was in the second half of last year, and doing it against a player who, yeah, he's young, and yeah, he's, maybe not going to be like one of the best rim protectors in the Big 12 just because of his age, but you want to see him do it against a guy who has the kind of potential and athleticism that Quaintance does. And of course, a lot of this applies to Braden Huff as well. We'd like to see him have a good game, down low on the block. But I think really the big key is wanting to see Graham look more like the player he was in the second half of last season. Key number 2, how does Gonzaga shoot the 3 in this one? Because in the first game of the season against Baylor, Gonzaga shot out of their skulls, 13 of 31 from 3. That's just under 42% Probably not going to average 42% all season long, but they're also probably going to shoot better than Idaho State did against Arizona State. Again, Arizona State currently at KenPom is 30th in defensive efficiency, in part because they held a D1 team in Idaho State to 48 points. But Idaho State shot 4 of 28 from 3. That is just outrageously ugly from them. Gonzaga is probably going to be somewhere between what Idaho State shot in that first game and what they shot in their first game against Baylor, would be my guess. But it'd be nice to see Gonzaga get over 10 threes, get tacos for the crowd, continue to be effective from beyond the arc, and really neutralize this Arizona State defense. Caleb Battle hit 4, Nolan Hickman hit 2. I think Dusty Stromer hit 3 in that first game. Are all these guys going to stay hot from deep? Especially Stromer, if he can continue to be an effective three-point shooter, that really gives Gonzaga another weapon off the bench. I would like to see Michael Ajayi get some more looks. I don't think he's going to be a high-volume three-point shooter necessarily, but he was only 1 of 2 in that first game, had 9 points in 22 minutes of action. So I think there's more offensive firepower from Ajayi that we haven't seen yet. In particular for him as a three-point shooter as well. So how this team shoots from 3 in this game is going to be a key factor going into that game. Key number 3, does the bench mom remain elite? And that's kind of what we talked about with Dusty Stromer. Braden Huff, Dusty Stromer, and Michael Ajayi were the 3 big pieces for Gonzaga off the bench. Assuming the starting lineup stays the same, they will also be the 3 main pieces off the bench in this game as well. It's possible Gonzaga makes a starting lineup change. I don't see why they would. When you beat a top 5 or top 10 team by 38 points, you probably don't need to make a whole lot of changes to your lineup. So I would expect to see that same starting lineup with Ajayi coming off the bench alongside Huff and Stromer. That's your 8-man rotation right there. In the last game, Gonzaga's bench entirely scored 42 points against Baylor, shot 18 of 27 from the field, which is just obscene. Incredibly effective, 66% from the field. Stromer had 11 points and 6 rebounds. He was 3 of 5 from 3. Huff had 14 points on 7 of 11 shooting. Again, Ajayi had 9 and 8 on 4 of 5 shooting. Do these 3 guys continue to be that level of good for Gonzaga? Because this 8-man rotation is as good as it gets for Gonzaga. Legitimately, this 8-man rotation is on par with Gonzaga's best teams ever, with their 2017 team, with their 2021 team. And if these guys continue to play at that level, Gonzaga is going to be really hard to beat this season. So looking for a big line or a big performance from those 3 players once again here against the Sun Devils. Key number 4, what about the deeper bench players? Gonzaga is going to typically play 8 strong against teams where they need to, against games that stay relatively close, but we're not sure if this game's going to stay relatively close. And so the question becomes then, how much will we see of Gonzaga's 9th guy, 10th guy, 11th guy in the rotation? That would be in no particular order: Emmanuel Innocente, Junsuk Yo, and Ismaila Diani. In this case, we're looking to see if Innocente and Diani make their Kennel regular season debuts. I think they probably will. They both played 3 minutes against Baylor. They totaled 6 combined points. Diani had 4 points on 1 of 1 shooting and 2 of 2 from the line. Innocente had a bucket as well. And then do we see Junsuk Yo? I think Yo's probably 10th or 11th right now. It sort of depends because Diani just is clearly the backup or the 3rd string center. So he could play more in situations where they need him to, but those 2 guys are kind of your 10th, 11th guys, with Innocente, I think, fairly clearly established as the 9th guy. And I think there's going to be a lot of games where we see those guys, but do we see more of them? We only saw 3 minutes again from Innocente and Diani in that first game. We saw about 2 minutes from Yo. He came in a little after the 2 of them. Does that continue to be the case? Does he play a little less in each of these games? Because that's kind of, in a lot of cases, that's the only difference between being the 10th guy and the 11th guy, is how you maybe can come in 1 substitution later than the other guys in the last 3 minutes of the game. It's a subtle difference, but I think that could be the case. At least it was the case against Baylor. So it'll be interesting to see if that pattern continues, if we see those guys get a chance to play maybe even more 4, 5, 6 minutes potentially in this contest against the Sun Devils. And then key number 5, keep going down the line. We talk about the bench in key 3. We talk about the deeper bench players in key 4, key 5. Which walk-ons are going to suit up? Looking on the bench to see which walk-ons are legitimately in uniform. That's a way to find out. If the guy looks like he could go into the game, that means he maybe is not redshirting. It doesn't necessarily confirm anything there. If you listened to Thursday's episode of Locked On Zags, we did our team or player preview episode talking about Diani and Yo, and also talking about the walk-ons on the roster. And I expect that obviously Joe Few will be somebody who's not redshirting this year. He will play in certain games, certain matchups. I also expect Joaquin Reyes-Moore, who they call Q. I think he is going to suit up this year. He was a redshirt last year, did not suit up for any games, so it would be surprising to see him also not play this year. So expect to see him in uniform, barring an injury, of course, or any situation like that. But I'm not sure on the others. My guess is that the two true freshman walk-ons, Cade Ornez from North Kitsap High School and Graydon Lemke from Las Vegas, are probably going to redshirt this year. Typically, freshman walk-ons redshirt. And there's a certain number of players you're allowed to dress every game. There's a certain number of players you're allowed to travel every game. Obviously, this is a home game, so they'll all be on the bench. But in future games, when Gonzaga is on the road or at neutral sites, my guess is you won't see those two guys. They probably won't be on the bench because there's a limit to how many players can travel. Gonzaga has 5 walk-ons on the roster, so I don't think those guys will be on the road, although I also don't think Braden Smith will be on the road. I'm not sure about Steele Venters with his injury situation. The last walk-on's Noah Holland, and he's the one I'm most curious about because he's a junior. He was spent 2 years at junior college, Allen Hancock College. He's from Idaho. His parents both played at Gonzaga. I think there's a chance he is eligible this year. The Gonzaga has 3 walk-ons who play: Joe Few, Noah Holland, and Q, whereas the 2 freshmen, Lemke and Ornez, end up sitting. This might not be the game where we learn that definitively, but it is something I will be watching for in this contest, particularly if the score gets out of hand. Well, folks, closing out the show, talked about Gonzaga's other game on Sunday. Lisa Fortier and the Zag women, they're 1-0 after beating Montana. We'll talk about that game, but then we'll also get you ready for a huge test they face in a true road game against Stanford on Sunday. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. So sign up now at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the college hoops action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one convenient place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Gonzaga currently has the best odds to win the battle for Atlantis at plus 145. Arizona is next at plus 170, followed by Indiana at plus 600. I feel pretty good about the Zags winning that Atlantis tournament. If you are with me or if you like any of the other odds FanDuel has on the site, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Reminder, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, segment 3, closing out the show and the week with a preview of Gonzaga's game against the Stanford Cardinal on Sunday. Also talking about their win against Montana earlier this week. The Zags are 1-0, 82-69 victory over Montana, who they play seemingly every year. I think this is the 6th consecutive matchup between Lisa Fortier's team and the Montana Lady Grizz. The Zags outscored the Lady Grizz 31-15 in the first quarter and then pretty much just coasted from there. A dominant start to this game. I think they ended up actually losing all 3 of the other quarters, but by like 2 or 3 points each. Just a dominant performance against a quality program in the Big Sky. The Lady Zags shot 49.2% from the field. That's 30 of 61. They shot a blistering hot 52.5% from 3, 11 of 21 in that area. 5 players on the team were in double figures. Really nice to see a team with so many new faces be as balanced as that. Coach Poirier is trying to find the lineups that work, the matchups that work. They were missing a projected key piece and friend of the program, Taylor Dalton, the 4-year starter at St. Mary's, who transferred to Gonzaga for her 5th and final season. She did not suit up in this game, but did not need her in this one. They still managed to go out and get a major victory, in part because of a true freshman, Allie Turner, freshman from St. Louis, who came off the bench, played 31 minutes off the bench because she was absolutely red hot from beyond the arcs. 18 points for her in her first game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists as well. She was 6 of 10 from the field. That included going 5 of 8 from 3. Really, really strong performance for her in her first game, and I expect that's going to lead to more minutes, potentially a move into the starting lineup, especially when 2 of Gonzaga's starting guards, Claire O'Connor and Esther Little, kind of struggled in this one. The 2 of them combined for just 5 points on 2 of 7 shooting, had a combined 6 turnovers. So wouldn't be surprised if eventually Allie Turner moves into the starting lineup, but also wouldn't be surprised if Taylor Dalton, depending on her injury situation, if she's healthy going forward, that she may step into a starting role as well. But Allie Turner was not the only key piece for Gonzaga in this one. Yvonne Ejim, of course, the Becky Hammond Mid-Major Player of the Year last year, a potential All-American this season, 17 points, 10 boards, 2 assists, 7 of 11 shooting for her, including making both of her 3-point attempts. If she's knocking down threes that consistently, look out. It is going to be really hard to stop this team and to stop her as well. Inez Betancourt, transfer from UConn, played very little for Gino Ariema's team the last couple of years. She had a very good first performance for Gonzaga as well. Starting point guard for this team, 16 points, 5 assists, and a pair of steals. 6 of 13 from the field. She looks like she's going to be the starting PG for a while. Again, we'll see if Taylor Dalton kind of steps into that role when she's back, but Betancourt sure looked comfortable. If you watch some of the highlights on the Instagram page, she had some really, really nice passes that she made in this game, and I think is going to be a fun player to watch going forward. Maud Hybens, one of the few returners for this team, 14 points, 8 boards, and a pair of assists for her. She's kind of stepping into that Eliza Hollingsworth role as the power forward next to Yvonne in the front court, and looked fantastic in that spot. And then McKinley Dolan, a transfer from Minnesota in the Big Ten, 12 points and a pair of boards coming off the bench in just 16 minutes of action. Now the big test. Gonzaga goes on the road to take on Stanford. This game will be at noon on November 10th on ESPN2. So, folks, very simple. Get YouTube TV, Fubo, whatever it is, fired up at noon. Have it on ESPN2 for 2 hours. Game's over. Boom, flip over to ESPN, and you get to watch the Gonzaga men's team. It's going to be a fantastic day on Sunday. 4 straight hours of Zag basketball on the 2 ESPN flagship channels. Doesn't get a whole heck of a lot better than that. This is Stanford's first season in the post-Tara Vanderveer era. She'd been the head coach at Stanford for 38 seasons. She won 3 national titles there, one of the most prolific coaches in women's college basketball history, in college basketball history in general. She's the winningest coach in women's history, although Gino Ariema at UConn will overtake that record probably later this month. So she's not going to hold on to it for a whole lot longer, but what an incredible accomplishment for her. Kate Pay takes over as the Stanford head coach. She's a long time assistant behind Vanderveer at Stanford. So Stanford's hoping that she will kind of just pick up the mantle and keep this program going with the amount of success that they've had. I think the move to the ACC is really hurting them in the sense that the Pac-12 was a really strong women's basketball league, and I think there's a lot of players who do not want to play on a team where they're going to be traveling as much as Stanford's going to do this year. So I think this is an unfortunate timing for Kate Pay to take over in an era where it may be harder to recruit, not just because of Vanderveer's absence, but because of the move to the ACC. We'll see. Stanford sure didn't look like they had any issues in their first game of the year, a 107-43 win over Lemoyne, one of the newest programs to the D1 level. It was only 16-10 after the first quarter, but then Stanford just cruised after that. They outscored Lemoyne 29-9 in the 4th and final frame of this one to end up coasting to a major victory. They shot 18 of 34 from 3. That's about 53%. Junior guard Zania Harriel had 24 points on 6 of 7 shooting from 3. Senior guard Elena Buscana had 19.7 boards, also shot 4 of 6 from 3. The team as a unit had 25 assists and just 6 turnovers. Stanford's going to be really good, folks. There's not really any reason to assume this team's going to have a steep decline, but this is also the first real test for Coach Kate Pay. In her entire career, longtime assistant coach, this is the biggest test she will face in her second game as the head coach. It's very cool that Gonzaga gets the opportunity to be kind of that first big game for her in her career. Obviously, it's a huge test for the Lady Zags as well. Coach Fortier's team got their victory against Montana. It wasn't a dominating game. They didn't win by a bunch of points, but they won. They were won fairly comfortably in that one. And I think now have a test of what is this new team, new players who haven't had a lot of experience playing together before. How can they rise up to the challenge? Again, Gonzaga beat Stanford by 18 points last year, one of the worst losses Stanford had ever taken in the non-conference. Stanford's going to want revenge on that game, absolutely. And for Gonzaga to have so few returners from last year, this is a tough test for Coach Fortier's team. Even if they don't win it on the road, it's a great learning experience. It's a good opportunity for them to grow from it, figure out where their strengths are, what are things they still need to work on, and get more prepared to get into conference play. Before that, of course, they still got the rest of their non-conference, which will be the next matchup will be on the 14th of November, so the Thursday after, and it'll be at 6 p.m. at the McCarthy Athletic Center. So the Zags will have a chance to play another ACC school and former Pac-12 opponent. And again, depending how the Stanford game goes, if they lose that one, they'll get a chance to rebound against Cal. If they win it, they'll get a chance to move to 3-0 with 2 wins over ACC teams, which would be a phenomenal start to the season for Coach Fortier and the Zags. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. And for this week, folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. I really appreciate getting to talk to you 5 days a week here on Locked On Zags. If you want to hang out more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to join the Locked On Zags Discord channel. It's free to join. There's a link in the show notes on both audio and video platforms. Come hang out. We're talking Gonzaga basketball, women's basketball, general college basketball, all sorts of stuff all the time in that Discord channel. Thanks again for listening, folks. Have a fantastic weekend. Looking forward to a pair of fun games on Sunday. And of course, as always, go Zags.